Energy and optimal foraging. This is the last lecture on the series before the first exam. And beforehand, I kind of want to spend a minute or two saying, where are we right now? We have a rule with filming at home, and that rule is we don't say the word today if we can avoid it. We don't say the word today because, well, today is July 23rd. And as of right now, as of today, we're planning on offering all classes in person, and there will be some people who want to take this online, and they'll want to watch it online. Some people are just going to want to review it online. We're filming for the second and third groups of people who are doing this because they don't want to come to campus for good reasons, and they wanted to just review it. That's why I'm actually filming this in the middle of July, despite the fact that I'm supposed to be taking my time off for the kids. I know I won't be able to film this closer to today, the day that you're watching this. And that's kind of one of these breaks here because this lecture is scheduled for September 23rd. That's 2 months away from today. And even weirder is today, the day you're watching this, maybe the 22nd, maybe the 24th, or maybe even before the final. So there is a real and distinct break in what we mean when we say today. Think about when I've been filming all of these, you may have looked at the skull and you may think, oh, okay, I can see him growing hair on these ones and back to bald. Is there a timeline here? I shave every 6 days. So completely new every 6 days. So there's really no timeline there. And who says I'm filming in sequence? I'm not. There is a real break. And this is what it means to be asynchronous, is that I honestly don't know if you watching this, if we have already gone to a fully online format or if we ever even started. So this is kind of the fun break. And I didn't want to talk about this to my freshmen or intro classes, but you're an upper level class and you can see me as kind of a person behind just filming all of these and just he filmed them sometime, somewhere, in some space. That doesn't matter. No, it does. I filmed this 2 months in advance in the thought that I'd probably see you in person, but you probably also want some review. So just kind of a little bit of fun there. And well, where are we right now? Well, we've just deployed federal troops to Albuquerque and Chicago to maintain order. Some moms got tear gassed in the last week, and some dads show up with leaf blowers. Kanye West is no longer running for president, and COVID cases are increasing right now. So that's where today is. Where is today for you? Well, I hope you're doing fine. And now let's talk about energy and optimal foraging, whenever now may be. List some limitations on why energy can only be taken in at a certain rate. So handling, search time, photosynthetically active radiation. These are some examples. List the 3 types of functional responses and be able to compare between them, differentiate between them. What are we seeing here? Calculate, yes? Calculate. Optimal foraging. Now, I'm probably not going to give you a bunch of numbers, but I want you to be able to write down the equation. Relate diet breadth to foraging. There's going to be some equations. I'll need to zoom in on here. And then relate foraging to root and shoot growth in plants. So, energy isn't infinite. There's a limited amount of energy coming into any ecosystem. That's just how much sunlight there actually is coming into an ecosystem. But even below that, primary production is limited. So primary production means plants can't take in infinite energy. You see here, at a certain point, there's actually plants giving more energy, using more energy in respiration than they actually gain in photosynthesis. So on a very cloudy day, plants, they're still alive, they're still respiring, may actually be losing biomass. And a series of cloudy days, like was early 2020, there was actually a series of cloudy days in June, about 2 weeks, when there was almost no sunlight. It's just a very cloudy time. What happened during that time is plants in the garden, they didn't grow. They just kind of sat there, and they actually were respiring at a higher rate or equal rate to photosynthesis. So you get this point at which they actually break even. So there needs to be a certain photon flux density, read as your photoactive radiation, your photon flux here. How much light are they getting? They need to get a certain amount before CO2 uptake can equal or be greater than CO2 evolution, so how much they're actually respiring. After light, there can be more and more light, and then at some point they become carbon dioxide limited. Well, good news, we're increasing the amount of CO2 concentration, so CO2 limitation won't be a problem anymore. No, it'll still be a problem, just at a higher amount. And there's actually, CO2 limitation is often after nitrogen limitation. So the plants need a certain amount of nitrogen to make new enzymes, to make new cells. Now, there's also rate limiting enzymes. Some enzymes only work so fast. So there's always something that's going to create a limitation for the amount of available energy in an ecosystem. So plants do have some adaptations to energy intake limits. Some plants are limited at far lower light levels. So they're actually able to be more efficient with a lower amount of light. And that can be because they have more chloroplasts. It can be because they have more production of rubisco. You may see these shade-tolerant plants have a denser, darker green, and that is because they're more able to take in any light. The photosynthesis type, being C3, C4, or CAM, really does matter, and temperature matters. Remember, carboxylase functions optimally at a different temperature than rubisco, and crassulacean acid metabolism is going to function differently than simple C3 metabolism. So you see an example here with a C4 plant working far better at 35 degrees Celsius, and a C3 plant working a little better at 35 degrees Celsius. But at 10 degrees Celsius, the C3 outcompetes the C4. And this is one reason that during the spring, your grass is going to grow better. During the summer, your crabgrass, a C4 plant, is going to grow better. So there are adaptations to how different energy comes at different times, and these different plants will function better at different times. And one sum of this is the more plants in an ecosystem, the more energy is going to come in total. Okay, but it's still limited, and there's still a limited amount that herbivores can get from these plants. So when we talk about animals, we're going to be thinking about something called a functional response. And that functional response is, how will an animal respond if it gets more food available? Now, how will a plant respond if it gets more light available? Well, we just saw that. How will an animal respond if it gets more food available? The feeding will increase and then it will level off at some point. And we really want to think here too, as far as ecological stoichiometry goes. Remember that a low quality food needs to be taken in at a higher quantity in order to meet the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that an animal is going to need for their body. So there's a certain optimality to what is eaten as well. So there is also the possibility of choosing different foods. If you were given this buffet, and I hope you're moderately hungry when you're looking at this, you're thinking, I'd eat that, and you're pointing at something, and that is probably something that is higher in sugar or fat or protein, because these are the things your body may need. Also, salts are something the body may need. So for all of these, there's actually the costs and benefits compared between foods, not only the costs and benefits of how much food gets eaten. So there really is a variance here. We're going to focus first on how much food can be eaten and how the feeding may increase or level off depending on the amount of food given. So there are three types of response curves for how an increasing amount of food available, think of just one type of food, is going to change the how it's eaten, so the behavior here. The first one is simply called type 1. And think of a grazer or a filter feeder. This is something that is eating the food as fast as it can encounter it. And it's a simple linear change between the prey density and the prey eaten by the predator, and herbivore too. So a cow put in a field will eat the grass that is available to it. If you are just thinking of a cow and grass, It will just eat every bit of grass available to it. A whale shark put in a sea of plankton. The more plankton, the more feeding. And for organisms that have an ecological stoichiometry where the more food, the better, well, there we go. It's a simple type 1 feeding curve can actually be the most optimal way of evolving to handle that. To just encounter, eat. Seafood, eat it. It's a seafood diet, right? Type 2. Type 2 is the most common. So this is where the organism finds food and has to handle it. It's that green curve down there. And that green curve is your type 2. It increases rapidly early on and then kind of slows off and has a maximum capacity. So think of if you were to just have peanuts. Yeah, if you're allergic, pistachios. If you're allergic to that, walnuts. If something that has a handling time. So the handling time can also be pursuit time. So how long does it take to find it? How long does it take to chase it down? And at low densities, there's a low amount eaten, but this rapidly goes up as the handling time is the thing that's limiting it faster than the prey density. So the handling time matters for that, and this is the most common type of response, because you can also think in terms of handling time. Digestion is a form of handling. And there's type 3. Type 3 is not as common as type 2. It's that the organism actually is slower to uptake the food at lower densities. And one thing that can do this is a learning curve. It actually takes a certain amount of time to learn how to eat this prey item, to figure out how to eat it. And when it's encountered at a low density, you don't see the predator attacking and getting it very often. It has to learn how to attack it. Think about every sci-fi film where they have an invasion of some invincible monster. The first monster takes a very long time to destroy. But after that, they start destroying monsters based on the monster density, maximizing out in whatever novel weapon they had. It turns out that if you pop bubbles of bubble gum near it, then it dies. Well, as fast as we can pop bubbles of bubble gum in front of these, then they'll die. Well, that depends on the density of the monsters. And there's a maximum amount of bubble gum popping we can do. It's whatever. Basically, some way of handling it. It takes a long time to learn. Once it's learned, it can act quicker. And then there's, of course, a maximum. And the idea is there's always a maximum amount of food that can be eaten, that can be consumed. So these are different types of functional response curves based on the prey density. And we covered in a previous lecture prey responses to predation, something like coloration or size-specific responses. But there is another one, and that's predator satiation. That's to take advantage of that top of the curve. So if a predator can only eat so many per unit time, then just expose a predator to more. If you have a raccoon, and a raccoon may have this type 2 curve when it comes to cicadas here. A raccoon encounters a cicada, a raccoon has to handle a cicada, that means removing the wings, and then a raccoon has to eat the cicada and digest the cicada. Okay, so your handling time really is the pulling off the wings with the cute little raccoon paws, putting it in the mouth and chewing it with a cute little raccoon jaws, and pulling and digesting it with a cute little raccoon digestive system. So those are your handling time. Now there's a maximum amount of cicadas that can fit in a raccoon's paws. One at a time. There's a maximum amount of cicadas that will fit in a raccoon's jaws, one at a time. And there's a maximum amount of time that the raccoon will have to eat this. At some point, there's a maximum amount of stomach that the raccoon has. You can picture a raccoon lying bloated and watching TV or something after a diet of cicadas. Go for it. That's your brain. Enjoy it. But some of these cicadas aren't going to get eaten by the raccoon. If the raccoon can only eat 100 cicadas per hour, but it encounters 300 cicadas per hour, and 200 cicadas fly away. So as far as cicadas go, it helps to be present in incredibly large numbers, but not invest in defenses. If they did invest in defenses, it would increase the handling time, but it would also be a cost to the cicada. And if the probability that a cicada is going to get eaten is only 1%, it's really not a reason to invest in defenses. And predator satiation is the idea of the Zerg rush. make many young, some will survive, and as long as some survive with getting the genes out there, it's all good. That's evolution. Something survived. Made your genes go to the next generation. So let's look at a little more examples of optimal foraging as an equation and as a behavior is an optimal response. I don't know if you can hear the thumping, but my children are running around upstairs right now. Under what conditions was I filming it? Yeah. So there is a way of trying to get the most food in the least time. And I want to introduce this with an example with some birds and some squirrels and even a cat. The most popular bird feeder in the neighborhood is probably right here. And the reason for that is it's full of sunflower seeds. Each one of these seeds has a core of pretty much just oils and fats, but that core is protected by an outside seed coat that needs to be cracked, opened, and then this small seed inside extracted and eaten. I don't like them. Each bird handles the seed for a certain amount of time and then feeds and then gets nutrients from the seed. And as you can see, there are a lot of seeds available, so finding more seeds is not incredibly hard. Not only is it popular for birds, but as you may notice some damage on the top, this is also a very popular place for squirrels, which is why I hang the bird feeder far away from the house, because a squirrel that could get in here would be able to get all that oil and all of those, all the seeds it could eat just sitting there. So this is a case of foraging. A bird just has to fly over, grab the seed, handle the seed, and then fly back. And they fly from this nearby magnolia tree. Now the magnolia tree I've been trimming and pruning practically every year because it tends to want to focus its energy on the tallest branches, growing them up to 1/2 meter per year. The lower branches, however, if I trim them just enough, they make more of a intensely, densely branched structure, which is a better habitat for the birds. So I want a good habitat for the birds down there, so all they have to do is fly up here where I hang my feeder. This is optimal for them, but it's not optimal for the tree, because the tree, if focusing its energy on the top branches, will be able to get more sunlight. So you have a case of optimal foraging for the tree and optimal foraging for the birds. Well, what about the poor squirrel? Well, birds are messy feeders, and a fair amount of birdseed ends up down there. So all a squirrel has to do is just go down to the bottom and feed on all the seeds that are dropped. Well, we have another party here, and that is a cat who currently wants to come outside. Well, that cat hides in the irises, waiting for a bird to come by and feed on some of that seed. So optimal foraging is really all around here. The birds get the seeds from a large feeder. The tree, I have to fight back against its optimal foraging because it's trying to get sunlight. The squirrel gets optimal foraging of things that are falling down, and the cat can just jump out and catch a bird. She hasn't yet. She's not very good at it, and I'm kind of thankful. I like the birds. So these are different examples of foraging just shown around a bird feeder. Welcome back. So that was fun, and it's a fun bird feeder. It turns out that the amount of seeds that I put in there determines the amount of birds that are present. And fun fact, if I put more and more seeds, I get more and more birds until the seeds need to be replaced every week, or now it's about every half week. So yeah, I haven't figured out how to satiate them yet. All right, so let's put this in an equation. So I'm going to zoom in on this here. So E over T is equal to energy per unit time is equal to the prey density, the prey population, think N as your population measures, we'll get to that later, the energy per prey, the energy for searching, and then that's over 1 plus the number of prey and the handling time. So what this is saying is the energy you get per unit time is equal to, well, you see this functions a lot, the prey density here. Now, we can expand this too. Oh, also think, your encounter time, your amount of time spent searching. So more time spent searching, less energy you get. The higher the prey density, the more energy you get. The more energy per unit prey, the more energy you get. And then the more handling time, the less energy you get. There we go. We want to think about this in terms of multiple prey, though. That'll be diet breadth. Well, what if we eat two things? Well, the energy per unit time would be equal to encounter rate 1, energy 1, minus the time searching for 1, plus the same but for 2, divided by 1 plus handling time there, sorry. So the more time spent handling per unit population, the less energy. But both of these are in here, and it's only one is put in here. So increasing the diet breadth just ends up, this denominator does not grow as fast as it would per single thing. So switching to a different thing would end up costing a little more than having multiple things. This is an advantage to a higher diet breadth. So also up here we have just the addition of potential sources of energy. So this is when an organism may have an advantage to having more than one prey. So hunter and gatherer. Well, you also have to think what prey costs less per unit time. What's easier to find? What's better to eat? What's easier to handle? And that's trickier. It's when would an organism switch to a single prey instead of multiple prey? And that is this has to be greater than, here we go, the 2. E2 minus C2, right out of space there. And my bad, that's H. So this is the same thing, but for 2. I just missed size of the board. This means that one prey, if doing one prey alone is better than doing both prey, then there's an advantage to just sticking with one prey. And this is what would happen if given the chance between eating hamburgers alone and getting to eat hamburgers and cauliflower. Well, adding the cauliflower to the diet doesn't seem to really give much more energy. So go back to just eating hamburgers alone because it gives more energy for less handling time. And that may be when it's more optimal to just switch from one prey to another. Now, that does not necessarily mean that one loses the ability to hunt for both. So an increased diet breadth, say omnivores, an omnivore may switch to primarily carnivore when more meat is available at a lower handling cost, but would switch back to omnivore when it's just anything it encounters can just provide it with the food. And this becomes kind of a choice, and thankfully we're not going to be delving deep into the models for this. We do have to ask, is it even relevant to humans? Well, if you're going into the medical field, you're going to see a lot of obesity. Getting enough calories is not a problem now in many developed nations. Handling costs are minimal for your cooked food that you can just go and purchase. I can go to Costco and purchase a chicken that has already been caught, it's already been plucked, it's already been gutted, it's already been cooked, and I can even purchase one that's already been deboned and wrapped in breading. Totally go for that. There's no handling time there. There is the encounter rate, and that's really it. So this isn't so much a problem for humans, which can explain to an extent why more of a problem is nutrition. And this may be where humans who live in places like food deserts simply can't get enough vitamin C, and then that equation starts turning to, how can I get enough of the vitamins that I need? So think of it that way as well when if you're going into more of a human field. But this is ecology for all the other organisms. Let's kind of cover the plants. Each root and each leaf is a search. And if I were to bring you back to the garden, I would show you some viney little plants that are doing their foraging the best they can. They've colonized my yard because my yard has just grass, and they are capable of climbing over the grass and vining around the grass. And every leaf they put out is kind of a search. It's their cost of energy expenditure to go and hopefully find more sunlight. Each root is a search with a carbon expense. So if the plant finds water or nutrients, then it has encountered it and it gets energy out of it. Well, water and nutrients in this case. So expanding more roots into that area is more optimal. Looking at the magnolia tree that can expand up and always get more sunlight, or sideways and sometimes get more sunlight, my whole goal is to keep it from growing up too much so I get more bird perch area. And the magnolia's goal is quite the opposite. Plants also are able to use self-allelopathy to prevent competition with themselves. Plant roots may secrete compounds to keep themselves from overgrowing too much and keep the root from becoming too dense, because then they're interfering with their own optimal search. So that's optimal foraging. Look for the energy, find the best source of energy, use the best source of energy. It's optimal. It's a good thing.